I started coding when I was 12 because I was a loser. No one would hire me. Like, I was not that good. We had like 6 engineers, and I think it was like 6 months. And we were like, why is this taking so long? I did a lot of founder sales. Up until we got to 10 million, it was just a lot of like grind and like tons of sales calls and like it just, like Mortal Kombat, just like us just like trying to close these deals.
Before merge, you and your co-founder Gil met at Columbia. What were you guys doing at Columbia?
Probably partying. I think we met like freshman year when, just like out. But we were both in the CS department, which at the time was pretty small. Like just 50 people were studying computer science. I know. Now I think it's a majority of the students, but back then it was only 50. And so we were in all the same classes and we ended up being in a lot of group projects together. So it was inevitable for us to meet during that time period. But yeah, I think we ended up meeting like partying somewhere.
I didn't realize that you were a CS major. Had you always knew that you wanted to go into computer science and whatnot and build software?
Yeah, I started coding when I was 12 because I was a loser. And I was just like at home in Boston in the cold, just like building websites that no one was looking at. I was also emo. And so I was making a lot of like band fan websites. And that's how I learned how to code because I was so into these like emo bands that I was making these like fan websites for them. And then when I was applying to colleges, I knew I wanted to study computer science. Thought it was really interesting and it was really fun. I also had we were very lucky that my high school had a teacher for computer science. And so I ended up taking those classes and I really loved it. Those classes were mostly geared towards like gaming and like building games, but it was still really interesting for me. And I learned a lot from that experience. And because I really enjoyed it, I was like, oh, maybe I'll really like studying that in college.
What programming languages were you studying in high school?
It was Java.
Okay, because I was going to say, like, my high school was Visual Basic, and it was not enticing. It was not very much enticing.
Yeah, that's probably not the best intro.
Okay, so you meet at Columbia, but it sounds like you guys didn't start merge right out of school. You guys went separate paths for a minute. Where were you? Where were you going?
Yeah, so we were really close in college, though. I was student council president and he was student council vice president. So we worked together a lot in college. So that kind of set like a precedent for what it would be like to work together after school. But he ended up moving straight to San Francisco. He was like one of the best software engineers in our class. And so obviously a lot of like big tech companies wanted him to join their companies as like a software engineer versus no one would hire me. Like I was not that good. I also felt like a gap in my knowledge was like the fundamentals of business. And so I ended up working in investment banking after school and I stayed in New York for 2 years. And then I made my way to San Francisco when I moved into growth investing. And we just reconnected. He helped me find my apartment. He helped me find my car. And then, we would just like get dinner and hang out and catch up.
Nice.
And both ended up at smaller startups, which led us to the idea for...
Okay, so you were at an investment bank. And then you moved to the startup in San Francisco. Is it a startup we know? Is that still going?
No, it got acquired by Palo Alto Networks. The product still exists, but yeah, it's fully encompassed by Palo Alto Networks. It was called Expanse. Yeah, when I joined, we were around like 60, 70 people. And then we got acquired when we were around like, I think 180 to 200 people. So yeah, it was a really fun journey. And I was chief of staff to the CEO. He had such crazy stories. And we were selling to companies, like we were selling to like big Fortune 500 companies like Amex, like AT&T. And so it was really cool to hear a lot of his stories because he would have to go to like the masters to like network with people. But then he was also selling to like the DOD and like CIA and Navy. And so he would have to go to DC a lot from San Francisco. And it was really interesting to hear. At the time, there was a lot going on with like the intersection of like cyber warfare and politics. So it was like 2018 to like 2020. And so I just loved learning a lot from him. It was a really interesting time.
That's super cool. So when you were there, was that what gave you the idea for Merge?
Yes. So we had a really great product and we were very confident in our products and how good our product was compared to other options in the market. But we started noticing that we were losing deals to competitors just purely based off of integrations. And it was really frustrating for our executive team and especially our sales team. They were like bringing it up pretty much every single executive sync meeting where they were just like, we're losing deals because of integrations. Like we need integrations. Like this is becoming more and more important. And truthfully, I think in the industry, it wasn't that important up until around that time period. People were just expected to build the integration. Like you would buy 2 pieces of software and then you would just build the integrations to connect them. But there was increasingly so much VC funding that there was just more and more fragmentation in the market. And so the expectation of that for like every company that was buying 2 pieces of software to connect them, that just wasn't going to happen. There was too much competition. Buyers really wanted just integrations out of the box, and we were starting to really feel that. And so we tried to do everything to avoid it. We launched an API that we were like, oh, like our public API will solve these problems.
Yeah, let them integrate to you.
Yes, exactly. That didn't really solve it. Then we ended up hiring a contractor to build some of our integrations, and the code was so bad that we ended up just throwing it away. It was just really frustrating for the team. Then we ended up hiring a team of engineers to just focus on it. And it took them a really long time to build the first integration. Like we had like 6 engineers, and I think it was like 6 months. And we were just like, why is this taking so long? But I mean, it was a lot of scale. There were a lot of edge cases that we needed to handle. And the maintenance part was really, really time consuming. So we couldn't even get started on our second integration because we were still maintaining the first one. And I think like because I was like a software engineer, I was like, this can't be that hard. Like, why are they taking so long? Like this has got to be a little bit easier. And with Gil, and he was talking to him about work, and he was like, oh my God, like I'm so tired right now. I've been working on these like ATS integrations at my company since he was head of engineering at a recruiting tech company. And he was like, we don't have these integrations. Like our product is unusable. You have to have integrations for recruiting tech, and we don't have enough engineers. And so I'm building them. And I was like, oh, like, is it really that hard? And he was like, oh, you don't even know. Like sometimes we can't even get access. We built into the wrong API. The APIs differ like from every single platform. And so we then had to, like, we don't have feature parity across all the different integrations. And then now we have so many bugs, and like customer success will have questions. And so my engineers have to keep answering the questions, and they can't even focus on like their other work. And for us, like, I think it was interesting for us to hear how the industries were very different, but fundamentally the problems were very similar. And it was pretty fascinating that no one had really solved the problem. And we were pretty confident that it was going to keep getting worse. So we did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people, tried to get more confidence in like people's willingness to pay. And we definitely mostly focused on the problem and then came up with the solution later. But yeah, it was like a 6-month time period of just doing a lot of research.
What kind of integrations?
They were ticketing integrations. So Jira was the first one that we needed to build an integration with, like ServiceNow. There were a lot of others, obviously, that we needed to build, like Linear. Well, I guess Linear wasn't as popular.
Linear
back then,
wasn't, didn't exist,
Trello. Yeah. Like there was just so many different ticketing systems, Pivotal Tracker, like all these different ones. And yeah, I think we just ended up building like 2 or 3.
So this problem is a very big problem. It's a very hard problem. Like all the different APIs, how different they are. You have to work with all these different companies, and like half the time their API is trash or they don't have one. And you're like, you know what? Problem we're solving, we're going to go do it. But like that's insanely hard, like harder than most.
It's very painful.
Yeah, extremely painful because everything's constantly changing or breaking. And so the maintaining of these integrations has got to be like so much work.
Yes, it is. But the nice thing—
Why did you guys dive into this?
I think it was genuinely an interesting problem. I thought it was a problem that needed to exist. And I just think it's really interesting. It's also changed a lot, especially over the past like 3-4 years with AI. And I'm just very engaged. There's a lot of players involved. Like you have partners. There's a lot of complexity with like different breaking changes. Yeah. And you also just end up meeting everyone in the industry because everyone is connected and everyone wants to connect with each other. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting, but we are essentially selling pain. Like we're basically allowing people to offload like the pain that they would have in-house to us, which is really great. But and whenever we solve a problem, it propagates to all of our customers.
Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely it's a painkiller instead of a vitamin for sure. And people will pay for that, and that's super sticky, which is great. Which category of integrations did you guys start with initially?
So we were always planning on being cross-category. Like our goal was to really cross every single major like SaaS category that existed. We started off with HRIS and ATS because Gil had prior experience in ATS. I wanted to start in ticketing because I had prior experience in ticketing, but Gil was going to mostly be leading a lot of like development work. And so it just made sense for us to start with something we were more familiar with. But the problem with ATS is the TAM is really small. There's not that many companies that you can sell to. I mean, with my investing experience, I was just like, I don't think this is a good initial market for us to start with because we won't be able to scale. And that initial traction is really important for like setting the precedent for the rest of the business. And so I said, we probably need to pair it with another category if you want to get started. And so we ended up choosing HRIS since it seemed like there was a natural fit. We would be able to cross-sell. It would also show us, it would force us to end up learning like how to prioritize multiple categories at the same time.
Yeah. It sounds like you started there because that's where you guys were familiar with. But from the go-to-market perspective, was that the right call or how would you have done things differently?
It was the right call because it does require some learning, but it's not as complicated as like if we'd done like security. Like for security, we would have really needed to understand the industry like a lot more. That would have been like a harder learning curve. But for HRIS, a lot of the companies that we were selling to back then were like like Brex and Ramp and like Drata and like Vanta that were like and like I could understand what was happening for like the auto provisioning and like the monitoring of like employees leaving and like the org chart. Like I could easily understand that, and it was easier for us to sell, for us to ramp new sales reps as they joined the company. And for ATS, everyone had been a candidate at some point, and we were able to demonstrate like what an ATS looked like so they could understand it. But it definitely got harder once we got to accounting, which was our third category. Accounting was very difficult for us to ramp like new software engineers onto, for us to ramp like new sales reps onto, for us to ramp like new SEs. And even like myself and Gil, we had to relearn a lot about that. And yeah, so I am glad that we ended up starting with an easier category for us to just like kind of get some like, wind under our wings, because accounting was really hard. But because it's really hard to build and really hard to sell. It's really hard to like have competition, which is also an advantage.
I want to get to accounting in just a second, but going back to the HRIS, like these customers that you mentioned, why did they need like an HRIS sync versus doing something like Skim, where they could just auto provision?
Because the source of truth for a lot of Skim platforms. It's actually HRIS platforms, but it's sometimes like a subset of the data that's in an HRIS platform. There's also a lot of data that is missing in a Skim provider that is in an HRIS provider, like compensation, historical roles, maybe like some location data. Like Skim providers will be inconsistent with how much data a company will choose to input into it, versus an HRIS platform. Like you have to input data in there, otherwise you can't pay taxes, you can't do payroll. And so it really becomes a very effective source of truth. And so we started off with HRIS, but we have, of course, supported Skim over time for a lot of platforms and for companies that just prefer to also integrate via Skim. So it is still an option, but a lot of times we will see people just default to the HRIS provider.
I mean, that's exactly the reason what I tell our customers. I'm like, yeah, Skim's great, but you're missing a lot of information there. Okay, so going into the accounting as the like kind of the next category it's a new muscle you had to building another category, and it was very hard. But was the harder muscle learning the engineering side of things, or was it the go-to-market motion? And how was the go-to-market motion different?
I think both were hard. Both are really hard. And it took us a lot longer to find product market fit for the accounting API than it did for the first two categories, because it was so difficult. Those customers are so much stickier and bigger because it's so hard. So it was worth it. But yeah, I mean, both were hard. Like engineering was hard because we had to teach people like, why, like what, like is an invoice, like what are these like line items? Like what does this mean to a customer? And that's not natural for someone who hasn't ever worked in accounting before. And it's interesting on the go-to-market side, because then we would sign a customer on with an engineer who had the same problem, where the engineer, like that is the customer, also doesn't understand accounting. And so we end up having to coach them through it as well. So that became like another area of expertise that our team ended up having to have. But yeah, like we had an SA that joined at the time, and we gave him like a fat accounting book. We were like, okay, you're going to have to learn this. We need you to be like our accounting expert, and then you're going to have to teach everyone else all these different things. And he did. And so now like he's basically like our source of truth for a lot of accounting items, which has been really helpful for the business. But yeah, like every person on the go-to-market team and like the support, you have to learn like the basics of accounting.
Yeah.
Because there are so many customers in that category.
So with your sales reps, like you didn't get different ones for accounting. You trained the existing ones you had on that. And have you done that with every category?
We have. And I would say that's one of the downsides of our business is we do have to hire very smart people. Like we can't really hire people who like we just throw you in a room and you're like fine with the sales process. Like you have to be pretty sharp and you have to have a lot of capacity in your memory for like what are the differences between the different products. At least like talk shop like a little bit for all the different categories for common use cases. Probably read API documentation just like so you can answer if we support something or get the gist of it. And then now we have more products too. And so it definitely is getting harder. But yeah, thankfully we've hired really good sales reps. So they've just memorized a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like those types of reps are expensive, and generally just building these sounds very expensive to do. So you guys have had to raise money. How many rounds have you guys done? What have you guys raised?
Yes, we've raised around 75 million. We raised our seeds, Series A and Series B. So yeah, we But I think what we were really good at is we are really good at hiring like undiscovered talent and then training people and like investing a lot in them. So we do have some external hires for sales reps, but we were also really good at like having like a full SDR to AE track as well.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in raising all this money, what was the pitch? I mean, I assume it gets a little easier over time as you're able to show like your metrics and whatnot, and people see the value of the business. But like in the early days, was the pitch just like, hey, this is a massive pain and people are willing to pay?
It was. And what was interesting was back then, most of the discussion was like, how is this different from Tray or Workato? That was mostly what people asked us. And like, I don't understand how this is different from Zapier. By the time it was our Series B, that wasn't the problem anymore, which was really great because I think when we first got started, it was just such a novel approach that people just could not understand it at all. They were like, I don't even think this is a problem. But now, like, people know it's a problem. And I think back, like, for a Series B, even a lot of the bet was like, can they expand beyond HRIS and ATS? Which is crazy to think about because now, like, the answer is objectively yes. But back then, like, people were just like really unsure if we could do it. And that was like the open question.
Were
for
they
us.
worried that you were going to spread yourself too thin going to these other categories? Or was that like, they were like, yeah, this is part of the plan?
They were just worried that there wasn't actually demand for this in other categories and that we wouldn't be able to sell it. So, but yeah, I think what was interesting for us was like, obviously a lot of things changed in the AI market. We made a very intentional approach to start being able to support AI use cases. And there are a lot of categories that are very relevant for AI like for AI companies specifically, especially AI search. And we were ready. So a lot of companies will start building, AI companies will start off with some kind of like AI search functionality. And it usually has to do with productivity tools or like sources of truth. So it can be like ticketing systems, it could be CRM systems. It can also be like file storage systems like Google Drive. Knowledge bases are very important too, so like Notion, Confluence, like all these places where there's just a lot of information that's important for the AI, like the AI platform to be able to provide insights or make actions that are relevant to that company. And so we able to see like, okay, I think these knowledge bases are going to be pretty important for like this next wave of businesses. And so we want to be ready by the time the market matures. And so we did build a little bit ahead of time where we were like, okay, like currently we have this like category. We had file storage at the time and it was very early and we had actually kind of deprioritized it a little bit because we were focusing on the quality for our existing categories. But then as we were seeing the market change, we were like, I think we have to really invest in this. Like this is where the next wave is coming. We need to start launching new categories. And yeah, and then once the market came to us, like we were already ready and we were the only option that was available, which was really exciting.
Okay, you talk about the market coming to you. Tell us about your go-to-market motion, how you guys have been able to be discovered, how you guys are making splashes. What's your strategy on go-to-market and what was it in the early days and what is it now and has it changed?
In the early days, a lot of it was just like me outbounding people and like having the direct sales conversations and asking people to take a chance on us. So I did a lot of founder to founder sales. And like up until we got to 10 million, it was just a lot of like grind and like tons of sales calls and like just, like Mortal Kombat, just like us, just like trying to close these deals. And then as we started deciding to move more enterprise, we matured a lot. Like we had like a true SDR team. We started doing more like sophisticated marketing. We started doing more marketing that's like focused on enterprise companies. And now for a lot of calls, like I actually don't need to join, except for like special situations or like when there's an account that like might need some like assistance. But yeah, a lot has changed like in that sales process. But like back then it was just like I had to be in like every call. We were training the sales reps. Like everyone was really new. So now we have a lot more like maturity in our business. Our CRO has created like a lot of really great process. So now like when there's an enterprise customer that comes in or we outbound and like we get a meeting, it's very structured. But they do find us in like different ways. A lot of it's like reputational, like word of mouth. Some of it's outbound. But yeah, like a lot of times like for these companies, like they've heard of us for a little bit and then they're like, okay, it's time. Like we want to reach out to you guys and like see like what's going on. Or like we reach out to them as they're like thinking about building something new and like our products are a good fit for that.
In the early days, as you're going with HRIS and ATS, how are you identifying which companies are going to be good potential customers for you and how are you reaching out to them?
So there's a difference in the beginning versus later. In the beginning, we were really scared about our product scaling because it was infrastructure and like it would be very scary for us to have a really big company and then our product is not working. So we were mostly targeting companies with under 50 employees. And a lot of it had to be like, okay, when I'm thinking in my brain, like, I kind of like PM a little bit, like, does this make sense? Like for this company to need HRIS integrations? From a lot of them, it was very obvious. Like at the time, there's a lot of like remote work companies, a lot of productivity tool companies that were starting COVID. A lot of them obviously needed HRIS integrations. But some of them like was a little bit more of like a hop. Like Ramp, for example, I was like, I think they'll need HRIS integrations because they're not charging us any money, but they're making so much money off the transaction fee. Like it benefits them to have every employee do it. And like, as I'm like adding each employee, like to the org chart, like I really think they need HRIS integrations. And so I sent an email. They're like, we don't need this yet, but like, okay, like good idea. And then they came back to us and they're like, okay, we're ready and we're really excited. And so they became like our first expense management customer, which is really cool. And that led to all the other expense management companies becoming customers later on too. So yeah, it's like a little bit of like PMing and like kind of like pitching, like I think this is like how it could work. That takes a little bit longer versus them having an existing integration. If they have an existing integration, I just know they'll need merge. Yeah.
You mentioned that you started out with smaller companies. When did you guys make the jump to like these bigger companies and like being like, all right, let's just hold on, see if our infrastructure can take it?
After our Series B.
Okay.
Yeah. After our Series B, we made a very like concerted effort to start moving towards the enterprise.
And what do you guys define as enterprise?
Yeah. So like at the time, sadly, it was like 300 employees and plus 300 employees and bigger. Now it's 1,000 employees and bigger because the sales motion does differ like across those stages. But at the time, because we were so early, like for companies that are more than 300 employees, like our product required a lot of diligence from them. But now because we have such bigger customers, it doesn't require as much diligence for companies that fewer than 1,000 employees. But yeah, that's how we define it now.
Why did you guys define it as like employees versus like there could be a company out there that has less than 300 employees, but has a ton of clients using integrations. Like Nectar is one of those companies where we have a lot of clients using integrations, but like we're not a crazy large company in the grand scheme of things.
So we've had that a lot where like smaller companies will have a lot more customers, and then bigger companies will have fewer customers that like might be bigger contracts for them as well. The reason why we ranked it by the number of employees at the company was because it was a helpful indicator of what the sales motion would be like. And the sales motion was just very different depending on company size. For companies with fewer than 100 employees, like the founder would kind of be in touch. Like we would be able to, or like we would know who the persona was. It was like a VP, head of, or the founder is involved in the sale. If it was bigger than that, it was unlikely that they were involved. It was probably like a lower PM or like a lead PM or maybe like a group PM, but like the head of product or like the founder would know, but they wouldn't necessarily be involved in the sale. And then once we got to like companies like JP Morgan and like Uber, there was just no way. There was no way that they would even necessarily know. But maybe we would like get like a touch point and just try to get in contact with them. But it wasn't going to be their top priority necessarily. It just the sale deferred so much. Like the amount of resources we had to put into each like segment also changed. Also, like the level of technical sophistication also changed too. For a lot of smaller companies, they would come in, they'd be like, okay, I know what I need to do. Like I don't need you to do this like whole thing. And they would just be a lot faster versus like much bigger companies. It's like a lot slower. They want step-by-step instructions. They want like QBRs. They wanted like a POC. And so we just tried to segment based off of that because it just made it easier for us to figure out like, okay, what is the sales motion going to be like?
Sure. That makes a ton of sense actually. Okay. In the early days with HRIS, I'm sorry, I keep asking about HRIS because that's the one I'm most familiar with. That's the one I deal with every day.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of HRIS companies that were like, we don't want to integrate with people. Our data's ours. We don't let anybody integrate, or we charge an arm and a leg to do it. How have you guys worked through those relationships and kind of moved the category completely to, well, I don't know about completely. There's still some holdouts out there.
Yeah.
But like move the category to more like an integration focused mentality?
I think it's just the customers. Like as we started getting more traction, as more people started using Merge, it just became like the expectation, like for you to compete, for you to stay relevant, you have to be more open. Like the ecosystem is very dependent on it. If you're closed off, like it's going to be very hard for you to win long term. And so over time, we started seeing more and more companies just noticing that was true. And so they started opening up. And it's interesting now because obviously like things are in flux right now in the ecosystem too with like AI companies. Like companies will either go like really close because they're scared about companies taking their data, or they'll go really open because it's an advantage for them to get more distribution. But we will listen to whatever the partner wants to do. So whatever their philosophy is, like we will do that. And I think because we've been very consistent about like being good partners, it's made it a lot easier for us to work with these companies. But yeah, like I just think that like if you want to win, you have to be a little bit more open. It's very hard for people to become dependent on you if your data is siloed.
Yeah. So is there a one size fits all in this new AI world of like being very closed versus being very open? Or is there like an in between? Does it depend on the type of company, or should every company be really open, in your opinion?
Biased. Obviously, I think everyone should be really open, because I think the more open you are, the more of like a source of truth you become. If you're like, if everything integrates with you and like it's very easy for people to pull data, like to have you as like a source of truth for all their different systems, you become more important in that person's workflow, because they're like, okay, I trust if I'm putting my information in this document, it will be able to be referenced in all the other vendors that I use. And I think that's very powerful. And like you can block that, like have a temporary moat, but it's temporary. And it opens up a possibility for someone else to come in, become the source of truth for you, because it's easier for that company or vendor to be integrated with.
That seems like it makes a lot of sense in B2B. In the consumer side of software, I feel like it could be different. So I look at a Facebook or a Meta, and it feels like they're like, you know what? It's actually bad for us to have a bunch of agents using data, doing things that are not human, and like it kind of ruins the human experience. What would you say to that?
There definitely are some situations. Like I saw on X, they blocked like some replies from bots. I agree with that. Like it's also expensive for the company to support all the like API calls as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, in some situations, especially for like social media networks, I totally agree. I have noticed some like consumer platforms that are more like user focused, like healthware, like wearables, like those kind of
Yeah.
companies. They're a little bit more open, and I think for that, like it's really smart to be, because then like again, you are more like, okay, if I can have all of my information on like my Whoop or my Oura ring, like, and it can be synced into other platforms, like I'm really gonna use it because it can teach me a lot about myself. I'm not gonna switch to someone else, because I know like if I want to pull that data, like it's very easy for me to do it. And
Mhm.
I think that's really smart. But yeah, well, I think when there's multiple players involved, there are some risks.
What's it going to be? Are companies going to be building, like, let's take the Whoop example. I'm a user. I'm technically inclined, so I'm going to hook up this Whoop data to something else, maybe to AI to tell me other things about it. Are most users going to do that, or is that just the technically inclined ones? And how will companies still need to build these experiences for non-technical users who just want things right out of the box?
I think it's a little bit less likely that like my mom's probably not going to do that, right? But she might find a platform that integrates with Whoop, and then she might have questions about like her data. And in that case, whatever platform integrates with like Whoop or Oura Ring, like she'll enjoy that. Yeah, I don't think she's gonna like spin up Claude Code and like do that on her own, but like I think she will try at some point. She might try to find a platform that has that information for her.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Is there ever going to be an end to the amount of categories that you guys integrate with? That seems like it's just a massive thing to go tackle.
No, I don't think so. I know I thought there might be an end, but there is no there is no end. It just keeps going. And also like there are new opportunities for that are like outside of categories that are also becoming interesting for us. Like we launched agentic tooling in like October. That was a gap in the market that started emerging. So it wasn't necessarily, it's not a new category, but was like a space that was really interesting for us. And we felt like it was a right to win for our product and team. And then LLM routing too. So like a unified API for LLM providers. That was another, not category necessarily, but like a product. So I think the market's just changing so much. There are going to be places where there's a gap where it feels like a natural extension of our current offerings. So I don't think it's ever over. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. And so just to go back to the LLM routing thing, this is kind of a similar concept of one API to be able to hook into all of these things, and you hook into Merge's API there, and then it can intelligently route things to the correct LLM based on all the parameters that you give it, correct?
Yes. So you can hard code it. So you can set your own prioritizations. We also have smart fallbacks. So like if a model is deprecated or there's any downtime, we automatically route to a different host. So there's no downtime for your product. Another thing that's really interesting is some customers will want to specify like, I only want to use Gemini or I only want to use Anthropic. And our product can really be like fully white labeled in your product. So your customers can select that in there. We also are building support for like syncing customer contracts. So like if some customers like, I don't want to use any open source models, or I want ZDR, or I don't want any routing into the US, only I want to stay in Europe, we'll be able to smartly do that too. And customer contracts are getting more intensive, especially with AI. People don't want credit card information. They don't want PII getting sent to these different LLM providers. We'll also be able to block that before it gets to the LLM.
Cool. Going back to categories are never going to end, but you guys have done things that are not necessarily more categories, kind of a little bit of a different take of the same flavor. How do you think about the strategy? When customers are asking, hey, I want this category, I want that category, how do you prioritize these things?
I know. So the goal is that we won't have to prioritize. So we're doing a lot of work internally to make it so that we can say yes to more, because
Wait,
especially
is
like
that
in
just
AI,
infinite amount of capital and infinite amount of engineers? How do you not have to prioritize things? That doesn't make
it's
sense to me.
AI.
Just use AI to go better and faster.
Yeah. And I think like obviously it's harder for like an existing product to be like, it's harder for an existing product with a lot of customers, especially scary customers, to just kind of like, okay, vibe and do this. Like that's just not possible. And so we're really trying to make sure that we can do it much faster in like a very safe way, especially given how much data we have on like what could go wrong. That data is very, very helpful for us. So we're using a lot of that to make our product stronger and then also allow us to move faster.
What was like the thing where it was almost like existential for you guys? Like, were you freaking out? Like, my gosh, this could kill the business. Was there ever a moment like that?
Not like existential, but there was a period early last year where we were just moving moving a lot slower. Like we weren't using enough AI. We were getting like pretty bogged down by like how scary our customers were. And so it made it harder for us to move faster. I think like we just had to make a really proactive decision. Like, okay, everyone here at the company has to be using AI, like recruiting team, finance, accounting, obviously our engineers, but like we can't just like paste code into ChatGPT and ask if it's correct. Like we need to be just aggressively building new things and building the systems to make sure that those new things are not going to impact our customers in a negative way. And so it was a lot of work. Like we ended up spending like 6 months, and we're still working on it now to make sure we have those guardrails in place while also moving really fast, and also just have a culture of like expecting people to be like teaching themselves about like new AI features that are
Yeah.
getting released and like how to best use like Codex and Claude, like all these different tools. And so I think that change like made a big difference. And if we hadn't done that, like I don't think we'd be where we are today. So it wasn't like a moment where we were like, oh, like we're gonna die, but it was more just like that was a
Pivotal
really
moment.
important. It was a pivotal moment in our business. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the end goal with Merge? Do you have one?
Yeah. I mean, I want all of our products to serve like all the large AI companies, all the largest companies in the world. Like that's really important for me. So I just want this to be as big as possible.
Yeah. Are you hiring? Who are you hiring for? Where are you guys
We are
at?
aggressively hiring. We're hiring in San Francisco, New York City, and Berlin. We're hiring all across every single department. We're hiring software engineers. We're hiring engineering managers. We're hiring designers. We're hiring technical support. We're hiring customer success. We're hiring in finance. We're hiring recruiters. We're hiring everything. So if you're
Everything.
interested in joining, please email me at shensi@merge.dev, or you can message me on LinkedIn.
Love it. Well, Shensi, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. You've been great to work with, and this has been a super fun conversation for me.
Cool. Thanks for having me.